When we talk about infidelity, we tend to focus on the obvious stuff, right? The heartbreak, the anger. But what if the deepest damage isn't just a broken heart, but a completely broken reality? In this explainer, we're going to dig into the clinical research to uncover the true costs of betrayal. And these are costs that can literally dismantle a person's health, their identity, and their basic trust in the world.
So let's start with that first seismic shock, the moment of discovery. This image of a shattered heart, it's really more than just a metaphor. It represents the exact moment a person's world just fractures. Everything splits into two timelines. There's the before, and then there's the after. And those two realities are separated forever by one devastating truth. And nothing, absolutely nothing is ever the same again.
So, Section 1, a shattered reality. This is about that moment when the person you trust more than anyone in the world suddenly becomes a complete stranger.
And this is what that structural collapse really looks like. It isn't just about the future being destroyed, it's the past too. Think about it. Every single shared memory, every vacation, every I love you, every little inside joke, it all gets instantly corrupted. It's all thrown into doubt. You start asking, was any of it real? Or was it all just some big performance? This total loss of a shared history creates this profound sense of disorientation, leaving you feeling totally adrift in the wreckage of your own life, questioning everything you thought you could believe in.
Okay, let's move on to Section 2, the trauma of betrayal. Because this is about so much more than just hurt feelings. We're actually entering the realm of a clinically measurable psychological injury here. So is it just a case of getting your feelings hurt? From a clinical perspective, the answer is a hard no. This question just dramatically underestimates the damage. This isn't just hurt feelings. It's a recognized psychological injury. In fact, researchers compare the impact to the kind of trauma you'd see from a violent assault, a life-threatening illness, or even a natural disaster. It's a fundamental violation of a person's core sense of safety, and it's inflicted by the one person in the world who was supposed to be their safe harbor.
And that brings us to a clinical term, post-infidelity stress disorder, or PISD. Now, this isn't some pop psychology phrase. It's a condition that researchers use to describe the severe trauma that follows a betrayal. At its core is this intense cognitive dissonance. Your brain literally cannot reconcile the image of the loving, trusted partner with the image of a person who's capable of such deep, calculated deception. And that conflict, well, it isn't just confusing, it floods your nervous system with stress hormones and can cause measurable neurological strain.
And these are the real-world consequences. The betrayal literally rewires the nervous system. You get these intrusive, unwanted thoughts and graphic flashbacks of the affair that can play on an endless, horrible loop. Hypervigilance sets in, a state of constant, exhausting alert for the next threat, making it impossible to feel safe, even in your own home. To cope, some people experience emotional numbness, just a detachment from everything. And from there, severe anxiety, panic attacks, and a deep depression often follow, creating this profound feeling that you've lost the person you used to be. All right, Section 3, losing yourself. This is about how infidelity damages a person's core identity, because beyond any clinical diagnosis, this betrayal inflicts a deep and incredibly personal wound. It doesn't just break the relationship. For so many, it feels like it fundamentally breaks them.
It's interesting. While many people focus on the physical act of cheating, clinicians and survivors will consistently tell you that it's often the sustained period of deception, the endless lies, the secrets, the gaslighting that causes the most lasting damage. This is a prolonged psychological assault. Every single lie was a deliberate choice to manipulate the reality of someone who gave you their complete and total trust. And that betrayal is a heavy, heavy weight, one that's carried in the wreckage of every single shared memory.
And all of this leads to a central crisis of identity, what you could call the reflection of betrayal. The affair acts like a distorted mirror. It doesn't just change how you see your partner, it fundamentally changes how you see yourself.
Because after a betrayal, when you look in the mirror, the reflection staring back is often filled with these devastating new questions. Was I not enough? Am I not attractive? Am I just unlovable? The betrayed partner starts to internalize these questions, absorbing the blame for a choice they never, ever made. Their sense of self-worth, their attractiveness, their core lovability, it all feels like it's on trial. But here's the crucial thing. The infidelity was never their fault. It was, and it always is, about the choices of the person who betrayed them.
So that brings us to Section 4, the long shadow. And it's called that because the consequences of betrayal ripple outward for years. The damage doesn't just stop with the individual.
It's like throwing a stone into a pond. The consequences touch everything and everyone connected to that relationship for years, and sometimes for a lifetime.
And what's so critical to understand here is that this trauma shows up physically. Your body doesn't really know the difference between an emotional threat and a physical one. Research consistently links the chronic stress of betrayal to some really severe long-term health consequences. The body is just flooded with the stress hormone cortisol, and over time, high cortisol levels can promote inflammation, weaken your immune system, and seriously increase the risk of cardiovascular problems. This isn't just emotional pain, it's a full-blown physical health crisis.
And it's also really important to understand that betrayal isn't always physical. Emotional infidelity, which is often dismissed with, "Oh, nothing happened," can be just as destructive. While a physical affair is that obvious betrayal, an emotional affair, well, it acts more like a subtle starvation, slowly and quietly draining the life out of the primary relationship.
This happens when all that emotional energy, that intimacy and vulnerability, the essential nutrients of a relationship, are being diverted to someone else. The primary relationship is literally being starved. The betrayed partner often feels this as a kind of ghostly withdrawal, long before they know the cause. It's this haunting sense of disconnect that erodes trust just as surely as any physical affair.
And finally, this brings us to Section 5, an irreversible choice. The line that once it's crossed changes everything. We have to confront the hardest truth here. Some choices don't just create problems that you can solve, they draw a line that can never be undrawn. They are, simply put, irreversible.
Think of it like a permanent line drawn in the history of the relationship. The act of betrayal instantly recasts every single moment that came before it, and it casts a long shadow over everything that comes after. Nothing can ever go back to the way it was before that line was crossed. The innocence of the before is just gone, forever.
And this, right here, is probably the most misunderstood part of recovery. Even if a couple decides to stay together, they are not repairing the old relationship. That relationship is gone. It was destroyed at the moment of betrayal. What they're attempting to do is build an entirely new relationship from the ground up, on top of shattered foundations. And that is a monumental task, one that requires a level of raw honesty and vulnerability that many people just find impossible to sustain.
And so we're left with this final, sobering question. Trust isn't just a feeling. It's the actual foundation of a shared reality. Once it's been deliberately shattered, the pieces can never, ever fit together in the same way again. It forces us to ask what truly can ever be built on ruins. And that question, maybe more than any other, captures the deep and lasting cost of betrayal.